Okay, I've been asked to introduce you to Intuiface in about 20 minutes. I give demonstrations quite often, and I could take hours. I could take hours, but we're going to do this in 20 minutes. On your screen right now, you see the entirety of the Intuiface platform. Every product available in Intuiface is on the screen, and you have access to all of these products as an Intuiface customer. On the left, you see Composer. That's the editor, the tool you'll use to create interactive digital experiences. We're going to spend some time in Composer, so let's skip over that for now and jump to the right side, which is Player. Player runs the stuff you build in Composer. I'll show you how to build stuff in Composer, but at some point you need to run it, and that's what Player is for. And I'm actually going to open that up and talk a little bit more about what that means to run it in Player. It actually means one of three different things. You can run it in the venue. So on all of those platforms you see listed on the bottom of the screen, you can install Player as a standalone native application. It's not in the cloud, it's not in a browser, it's running natively on the device, and it can then run your experience. We even support the notion of remote deployment. You can build experiences in Composer and push those experiences to devices anywhere in the world running Player, running natively on those devices. But you're not just limited to this in-venue type of deployment. You can also deploy experiences as a web page. Yeah, as a web page. It runs in a browser across multiple operating systems. Still build it in Composer, but it runs in a browser. It could be a web page or embedded in an iframe. You can also run it as what's called a progressive web app. Here we say a mobile app. I guess it doesn't have to be a mobile device. The idea here is it's using web technologies, but it looks like an app. So on your iPhone or your Android device, you can have little icons, and when you tap it, it runs like an app, but it's actually an Intuiface experience. It's another deployment option you have. All of these options are available to you as an Intuiface customer. No matter which option you prefer for deployment, you're using Composer to build it. Pretty cool. Now, there's lots of other products in what we call the Intuiface Cloud. These are capabilities that literally live in the cloud. They don't run on your device. You don't have to use them. You can run experiences in an offline environment. We do have customers in air-gapped network communities. It's never connecting to the network. That's fine, but then you don't have access to these capabilities, which I'm also going to talk about in a little bit, so we don't have to talk about it here. Same thing goes for API Explorer. We're going to talk about all these things, so don't worry about it. But what we will do right now is go to Composer. So let's check out Composer. And we have here an experience. It's a Van Gogh museum exhibition. You've probably seen this, or you will see this very soon in what we call the marketplace. This is an experience built using some real fundamental principles of Intuiface. It's a little bit of a brute force construction, a little inelegant, but from the end user's perspective, it looks beautiful. And I'll explain inelegant when we go to another version of this experience. But let me give you a bit of a lay of the land here. We're in Composer right now, looking at what we call the canvas. This is where you actually build the experience and see what you've built. In this blue ribbon at the top, you can see a set of circular buttons. That's a drop down, some more circular buttons on the right. And by the way, a search box, you can search our online help center, just type it in there, pulls up in a web browser. So this drop down right in the middle of the blue ribbon shows all of the scenes in this experience. You can think of scenes as slides, but unlike slides, they don't have to be sequential. The order you see here may have nothing to do with the order they are experienced by your audience. By definition, typically you're using Intuiface to build interactive digital content. Interactive means people are choosing their own adventure. They might make a choice that sends them to scene 25. You're not going to number your scenes. It's very unlikely. Why would you number them? And your audience doesn't care what scene they're on. They just want the information they want, right? So they might, under the covers, be navigating from scene 1 to 25 to 4 to 36. They don't know. You don't care. It's perfectly fine. Now, as the developer, as the designer inside Composer, you do care a little bit. So you're going to name those different scenes. You can drag and drop to reorder them. You can have sequences like this thing called Artwork Collection, which can be expanded to show additional scenes as you see there. So there are a variety of techniques I can use as the designer to organize my work. The audience will never see it. So how do we manage the content in the canvas? Well, I'm clicking this button for the scene structure panel. Now on the left, you can see the scene structure panel. This is an inventory of the items in the scene I'm actively editing. And it's actually pretty simple. There's this thing called the experience layer. We gave it a name, Navigation XP Layer. Instead of Navigation XP Layer, I could have called this Jeff. It's an experience layer, which means it is independent of the scene I'm editing. It is throughout all of the scenes. No matter what scene I go to, biography, there it is. You can still see biography, artwork, museum at the top. Let me go to artwork. Biography, artwork, museum, 3D at the top. All of those are here in the experience layer. It's a little bit like a master template in PowerPoint, but it's more powerful because it's not a separate instance per scene. It's a single instance across all scenes. If I put music in an experience layer, it plays while I transition from one scene to another. It doesn't stop and restart because there's a new instance in every scene. Super powerful feature, experience layers. So we're using an experience layer to manage the navigation options here in the experience. And then in the scene itself, as you see in the upper left, the scene itself, this one is called home. Remember, there are multiple scenes in this experience. This scene is called home. And this scene has a set of layers. Well, in fact, it's got one layer. Like a Photoshop, you could have multiple layers. You default to one. This has one. And this layer has some squares and some visual effects. And there's a text asset here. So these are building blocks I'm using to create the visual. For example, on that left, again, you see that Vincent van Gogh thing that I just highlighted on the left? Well, there it is in the canvas. And I can independently move that around. So each individual item in the canvas, I can maneuver, manipulate, control in the canvas. And it's the job of the scene structure panel to keep track of it. And there's tons of things I can control about every single aspect of my design. In the upper right-hand corner on the blue ribbon, you can see the Properties button. I'm clicking that, which opens the Properties panel for the thing I'm editing. Here we have the Vincent van Gogh text, right? And on the right, you can see all these different properties I can manipulate, and fonts and colors and italices, and is it centered, and maybe I'm going to color it differently. I have all these different things I can use to configure how it looks and how it acts. Let's move on to a different scene, which is the artwork scene. And I want to show you how it was built, and I'm going to play it so you understand what it looks like. Using the scenes drop-down panel there, I can pick a new scene. I'm on the artwork scene. You already know if you look in the scene structure panel on the left, I know what's in there. And you can see that there's something called an asset flow. You see that? Let me close the experience layer. We know what that looks like. There's an asset flow with a bunch of images in it, okay? In fact, it has 6 images inside this asset flow. Asset flow is a type of collection. Inside that kind of collection are images. Let's talk about the images first. There's multiple kinds of assets in Intuiface. I'm clicking the asset button in the very upper left. You can see all the different types of assets available in Intuiface: images, videos, live streaming YouTube, live streaming the webcam, documents like PDFs, websites, 3D models, audio files, deep zoom from Microsoft, and the HTML frame asset. I can embed my own HTML5 code with style sheets and such inside Intuiface. They're like Legos. At the end of the day, this is a Lego set, and I can drag and drop my Legos into the scene to build whatever I want. In this case, we have 6 images inside the asset flow. These images don't have very creative names, Paint 1, Paint 2, that's not very exciting. If I go to the content library, I click the button for the content library up top, you can see all of the media files used in this experience. And here they are. Here we call them Landscape 1, Landscape 2. Let's see. Let's select Paint 1 in the Scene Structure panel. And we'll look on the right. See Released Image and Pressed Image? There's Landscape 1, Landscape 1. So we have references to the images in the content library. Just check this out briefly. If I had a scene, so I have a brand new scene with the experience layer automatically added in. Let me grab one particular image from the content library, put it into the scene, resize it with my mouse. On the right-hand side, again, you can see I can constrain and configure how that looks and reacts. I'm using my mouse here. Staying on the right then, notice I can make this a static container, make it free, or make it pinnable. By default, all assets in Intuiface are static. You cannot manipulate them. But if I change that to free back on the right, then I can manipulate it, okay? Well, I tell you what, let's do this. We have, back in the artwork scene, you can see I have this asset flow with 6 images. There are multiple collection types. Look in the upper right-hand corner. See all the different types of collections, these visualizations of multiple items. The asset flow is cool, but I'm going to change this to a carousel. Just because I think it's kind of pretty. Let me change the view angle a little bit. How amazing is that? How quick is that? Top of Composer. Let me test my work. I want to test my work. Let me click the play button at the top of Composer. We embed Player inside Composer so you can test your work. You don't have to install it separately. And now we're running the experience. Here is that collection of images. This case, it's the carousel. See that? And no matter what I click, if I click an image, I get this pop-up with additional information about that image. Super rapid, right? Make a change, play it. Is it right? Go back, make changes, play it if it's right. Let's talk a little bit about how that image popped up, right? I clicked something in the carousel and up popped a bigger image. On the left, you see those lightning bolts next to each image? That means there's a trigger and action associated with the image. Let me just pick this one. And here we have the triggers and actions panel. Everything in Intuiface has its own set of triggers and actions. Everything. Trigger, when the event happens. Action, then do one or more things. In this case, when the Paint 1 image is pressed and released, then go to the scene named Painting 1. It's actually navigating to a new scene. Where is that new scene? Well, look at the scene structure panel in Artwork Collection. There's Painting 1 right there. Okay? So what's happening is we are navigating to a different scene based on which artwork I select using triggers and actions. I can do anything with triggers and actions. There's hundreds of triggers and hundreds of actions inside Intuiface. Hundreds of them. And as you'll learn, because you can integrate with third-party APIs with things outside of Intuiface, triggers can be outside Intuiface and the actions inside or vice versa. It's unbelievably versatile. So there's lots of other capabilities we can talk about here. I'll touch on one more and then show you why I said earlier this is a little bit inelegant. It works. The audience loves it. There are better ways to build it. I'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk about one more fundamental feature first, which are interface assets. Interface assets enable me to interface with things outside Intuiface. I just told you that the trigger could be outside Intuiface or the event could be outside Intuiface. That is facilitated through what we call interface assets, interfaces to things outside. In this experience, we have a couple interface assets. One interfaces with an Excel spreadsheet. We're storing some information in an Excel spreadsheet. It's local to the device. So if I make changes in the spreadsheet, it's reflected inside the experience. We also have something called data tracking, which is the fundamental step for using analytics. By having the data tracking interface asset inside Intuiface, I can then specify when I want to collect data. Not all the time collecting data, but specify a trigger. When this trigger happens, then collect this specific kind of data. For example, let's go back to those images. And remember, it said when the image is press or release to navigate to a scene, I'm going to add one other action, interface assets, data tracking, log event, and then I can give the event a name and then add some parameters for analysis. I'm not expecting you to be an expert of this. I just want you to see that with interface assets, I can access capability outside Intuiface and incorporate them in my experience. In this case, I'm calling a second action. Single trigger when an image is pressed, two actions. One is navigation, the other is collecting data for analytics. Play a video, rotate a 3D model, turn the lights on, stop the music. You can call anything you want with Intuiface. It's beautiful. So these are some fundamentals of Intuiface. Let's talk about elegance here for a moment. I actually have a different version of this experience running in Composer. But this instance, the images are not here. The names of the menu buttons are not here. I even have two language versions. Look in the upper right-hand corner. There's the English version and the French version, which you can change dynamically. Somehow we've built this experience without the images, without the text, having different languages, and none of them are here. How the heck do we do that? Well, let's go back to that artwork scene. Open up the scene structure panel, which should now make some sense to you. Here's the experience layer like before on the left. I'm closing that. Here's some pop-up when I select an item. It's visualizing that big version. Let me close that. Let's just focus on the scene itself. There's the asset flow like before. Remember the asset flow? But now it doesn't have 6 images in it. It's got this thing called Artwork of Van Gogh DB. That's what we call a data flow. It's reacting to a data feed, in this case, Intuiface Headless CMS. The images are not here. They're in the Intuiface Headless CMS. The Headless CMS is a content management system that lives in the cloud. Check this out. Here we have the Headless CMS running in my browser. I have a set of bases in my account. The very right-hand base is the one that's being used by this experience. In this base, we define a set of data structures, and we specify content for that data structure. By data structure, I mean what kind of information will be used by the experience, how are they organized, what kind of media is it, that sort of thing. And if you look on the left, notice there's a node for the artwork scene, and then it's got a collection called artwork. Now, this is just where we define the structure. What is an artwork according to our data structure? It's a picture and a title. It's a picture and a title. Okay, let's go to content. And notice we're on the artwork node, but now we're on the content view, not the structure view. And there are 6 images here, a picture and a title. In the structure, we said artwork picture, artwork title. On the content tab, it's the specific image, the specific title. Here's the beauty. Anybody, even if you don't have access to Composer, can modify these images, change the images, add images, take them away, play with the titles, and the running experience automatically sees them. You don't have to run Composer. You don't have to redeploy an experience. You just need to change it in the Headless CMS. There's lots of additional cool capabilities about the Headless CMS, but hopefully this already helps you understand why this version of the experience is a little more elegant, because it makes it much easier for me to make changes. It also makes it easier for me to maintain the experience because all of this media isn't floating around the experience. I'm not burdening it with all this content. I've pulled it all out, makes maintenance of the experience easier. I just have to worry about accessing this in the cloud. Now, let's say I'm running this experience. I showed you that we can collect data for analytics. Let's say that every time I click one of these images, I want to record that. I want to know how often my museum goers are viewing each image. Is one image more popular than the other? You saw, again, we can log events every time something happens, like when an image is touched, log an event. Well, what do we do with all of that data? Which brings us to analytics. So here we have a dashboard that I quickly built for this running experience. It takes data collected by the experience and displays it using over 30 different chart types. I made these charts, right? They weren't made automatically, but I specified which data to collect as well. So the product doesn't just willy-nilly collect data. As I mentioned before, you specify the trigger, you specify what data to collect as a result of those triggers, and then based on my key performance indicators, my KPIs for the project, I'm building a set of charts. We built analytics because it's crazy to drive at night with your lights off. You need to know where you're going. You need to know how well the project is doing. But most of you probably haven't done analytics before. So not only do we let you collect data, we enable you to visualize it as well. And these are just some examples. Total experience dwell time. In other words, how often was somebody standing at the experience? And this is on a weekly basis. Average dwell time per scene. How long does somebody on average spend on a certain scene? And the artwork scene is easily the most popular scene. All the other scenes are much smaller, which kind of makes sense, but now we can see it. Number of data points collected per hour, number of events logged per experience, cumulative data. I don't know. These might be pieces of information that I find are necessary. I think what's particularly interesting would be how often is each image is selected in the experience. We'd add a couple triggers. We'd add a couple of actions for data collection for each image, and we'd have data here in the dashboard, which can then be published. So all of these dashboards that we create in Intuiface can be published to the web, and you can see that here. I can share it. I can create one or more URLs. Each URL is a unique instance for the same dashboard. It is dynamically pulling data from what we call the data hub in real time. It's always up to date. You always have the latest information. This way you can share it with clients, you can share it with your boss, you can show it to your spouse, to always know at that moment in time how well your experience is performing, and learning from that experience ways to maybe improve it, or to learn about the campaign, or to improve the installation, or who knows what you can do with that. We have lots of other information, webinars and blog articles and ebooks and all this stuff about the beauty of analytics. Which brings us back to this view of the Intuiface platform. We talked about Composer, Headless CMS, Analytics, Player. Let's round it out. So in the cloud, we also have Share and Deploy. This is maybe most importantly about remotely deploying experiences to players anywhere in the world. And I mean literally anywhere. I might have, I don't know, I could have 100 experiences, right? I could have thousands of players. How the heck do I get those experiences onto these devices? Using our Share and Deploy console. Using a set of tags, you can specify specific devices. You can schedule deployments of any experience of those devices. We can remotely monitor those devices. For example, here you can see screenshots of what's running in each individual instance of Player. I can remotely update Player on a variety of devices. And I can also share those experiences with colleagues and clients so they don't have to independently install Player. Maybe they're using our web deployment. Maybe they're using our progressive web app, that sort of mobile app deployment option, giving their clients, their audience, their colleagues access to experiences in ways that are very simple. All of these different deployment options are available directly inside the Share and Deploy console. Account management, okay, that's managing invoices and licenses, and I'm not going to spend time on that here. But there's a lot of information up in the cloud. And then finally, API Explorer. API Explorer automates the creation of integrations with web APIs. Remember we talked about interface assets and the ability to interface with anything outside of Intuiface? Well, if it has a web API, and everything has a web API these days, you can build that integration using API Explorer. It is an integration that's live, real-time, dynamic, reading from and writing to that integration in real time. API Explorer takes the request URL of the curl statement, automatically understands what kind of response it's going to get. You can specify what you want from that response, put it in your experience. It works beautifully. It enables you to really access, I don't know, restaurant reservations, sports scores. You can communicate with the Internet of Things. I mean, anything with a web API you can talk to. And again, everything these days has a web API. All right, that's a lot of stuff done quickly. The beauty is there's lots of other bits of material and resources available for you to build your skills around Intuiface. This is sort of a quick look at the platform. I hope it gets you excited, that it makes you want to dive deeper. It really is kind of fun to use, and you're going to build amazing things.